Hi, town meeting members. This is Julie Hackett, Superintendent of Schools, and I am here to present to you the level service budget recommendation of the school committee for FY24. Context matters when we're building a budget, and of course, we're dealing with a lot these days. We have the pandemic followed by a national labor shortage, and then crippling inflation, which makes it a challenging time. We also start with budgetary assumptions, including the fact that enrollment is rebounding to prior projections, and we anticipate that that will continue. We anticipate that we could have new additions for special education mandates and enrollment impacts. And then we also imagine that we're going to see increases in transportation, tuition, and special education services, and that includes transportation. The way that we derive the FY24 budget starts with a conversation with the municipal side about the total revenue available for allocation. This year, there was $273.4 million available. Set-asides come off the top of that $273.4 million, and that gives us a figure of $266.8 million left available for allocation. In that process, we determine how much incremental revenue balance is available for FY24. That means how much additional funding is available. And this year we had $6.7 million additional. We take that $6.7 million and we apply the revenue allocation model that has historically been used in Lexington, which is a 74-26% split, 74% to schools, 26% to the municipal side. That's been a historic model used in Lexington, and it's worked really well. And so when we apply that revenue allocation model, we get a figure of 4.9 million or 3.89%. So we applied the revenue allocation model to the 6.7 million to get the $4.9 million additional to our LPS base budget for FY23, which was 128.2 million, 128.2 million with the additional revenue of 4.9 million gives us a total LPS allocation for FY24 of $133.2 million. This is a breakdown of how that money gets spent, and the majority of a school's budget anywhere is in salary. So it's about 80% typically, about 20% in expenses. You can see that the difference in salary and expenses this year looks a bit different from what it looked like last year. So salary is slightly higher, expenses are decreasing by $142,000 to account for that. And one thing to know is that 60% of our employees are on the top step in schools. So our salary costs are a bit higher because we have more veteran experienced teachers here. This chart shows you the budgetary increases over time by percentage. So I just talked you through that 3.89% of the incremental revenue available. And you can see that's one of the lowest increases over the base that we've had for quite some time. In 2017, we had 7.2%, just as an example. And when you think about the last few years, 21, 22, 23, 24, we were also contending with a pandemic. So it's been an extremely challenging time that way. Our original budgetary request for FY24 was 4.16%. So with a 3.89% allocation, we have a bit of a gap. And we engaged in many conversations about how to close that gap. And our primary concern was related to special education. We've had about 60 new students move into the system, many of whom have high needs and many of whom require additional support, such as one-on-one support. And some of the children who are moving in have not had formal schooling before, even though they've been of school age, and that has a lot to do with the impact of the pandemic. So in puzzling through how do we meet this shortage and make sure that the budget that we present is going to meet the mandated needs of the community. We talked a lot about the existing special ed stabilization account. There's $1.1 million in it. That was an account that was established in 2008 by the annual town meeting, and it requires a 2/3 vote of town meeting members to access the funds. We're going to have some operational challenges, and we're going to potentially need access to funding more immediately. So we've also discussed a newly proposed special ed reserve account in the amount of $750,000. In order for us to access that, it requires, through the Municipal Modernization Act, that the annual town meeting or the town meeting would allow us to establish the special ed reserve account. So assuming that gets approved, we would then need the approval of the select board and the school committee to access the funds. The FY23 projections versus actual enrollments are interesting because it shows you how we are beginning to get the students back that we lost during the pandemic. And you can see K through 5, we've had a difference in midline projection of about 65 students. So we got 65 more students back than anticipated. For grades 6 through 8, we got 37 more students back, and grades 9 through 12, 31 more students back. Overall enrollment was projected to decline actually by 86 students, but it actually increased in 2022, 2023 by 47 students. This is a look at the summary of FY24 staffing changes, and we are seeing an increase of 13.43 full-time equivalents. That varies year to year based on needs, and we have our budget managers and departmental leaders and principals all work through this process. They identify needs. So, for example, if a student in special education ages out, they no longer would require the supports that we had budgeted for. So that FTE goes away, and then perhaps a new need comes into play, or we're able to reduce based on what the current student needs are. And you can just see over time, FY17, there were 50 more FTEs, and FY23, we have 13 more FTEs. And this represents what's in the operating budget that's being proposed, and it does not take into account additional FTE that may be required through the special ed reserve accounts that I mentioned earlier. We wanted to give you a look at how we compare according to the districts around us and comparable districts. And you can see Lexington is that darker band in the middle or toward the middle. And we compare enrollments from 2009 to 2021 to determine growth. You can see there's approximately a 19% increase for us in enrollment. And next we compare actual net school spending in 2009 to 2021, and we determine growth that way. We spent $83.8 million in 2009 compared to $141.4 million in 2021, and the percent growth for net school spending is 68 to 69%. When we factor in the overall growth, taking into account enrollment and spending, our per pupil adjusted budget growth from 2009 to 2021 is 41.81%, and our per pupil expenditure is $19,429. And next, it's helpful to take a look at systems of comparable size. So if you scan this table, you'll see that our net school spending per pupil expenditures are lower than Brookline's at $2,402. So we're about $1,000 lower than Brookline, and we are significantly lower than Cambridge. They come in at $31,000 per pupil. And that is our budget process. And I want to, of course, give special thanks to our Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations and our whole finance team, who does a tremendous job with this budget process. We have excellent things going on in the school system, so many things to be proud of, and challenges to get ready for as well. One thing that's on our minds is the National labor shortage and the adverse impact, particularly to areas in teaching that are that serve our greatest student needs, so special education, English language learners, and that national labor shortage requires a deeper conversation, hopefully statewide and community-wide, about teacher compensation and the like. So we look forward to having those conversations with you to make sure that our schools stay as fantastic as they have always been. And we could not do what we do without your support. So I really want you to know, on behalf of the school committee and on behalf of everyone in Lexington Public Schools, just how much we appreciate you and thank you for supporting us and our students. Thanks so much. Bye.